Accessing library computer data.
The world doesn't always adhere to logic. And sometimes when you're lost, you're found.
Hey everybody, welcome back to our coverage of Star Trek Discovery. Right now we're up to the final episode of the second season. It's the 14th episode. It's called Such Sweet Sorrow Part 2. Aired on April 18th, 2019. Written by Michelle Paradise, Jenny Lumet, and Alex Kurtzman. Directed by Olatunde Osunsanmi. And in this episode, the USS Discovery battles against Control in a fight not only for the lives, but for the future, with a little help from unexpected friends. Spock and Burnham discern vital new connections between the red signals, while Burnham faces one of life's harshest truths. The right decisions are often the hardest to make. We're joined by Clay, as always. Clay, how are you?
Good. Wes, I know that we only have a very limited amount of time to do this, and we are on a very explicit ticking clock. But with that in mind, I'd like to take a long time to tell you, what our friendship means. And I'm going to be doing it in 3 parts. Each part happening when we have even less time to waste doing this stuff. And hopefully that will trick people into believing that we have a solid friendship.
Well, there's nothing like building a relationship we should start the relationship in this episode and then end it by the end of it, just so that we get the entire run of everything that we need to know is actually contained.
Are you shocked as I am that his last words to Burnham weren't "I am and always shall be your brother"?
Yeah, that's a good point.
Such a layup. I actually would have clapped if they did that, just because of the audacity. But
you know what's weird? Ethan Peck looks more like Spock when he has a beard than when he's clean shaven.
Yeah.
It's very funny.
Beards do strange things to people.
You might
that might be going on a t-shirt.
And I had a lot of opening jokes. I was going to introduce you as my favorite AI sausage.
Yummy.
Yeah, yum. Let's we made it to the end of Discovery's second season. We've got a lot to talk about, so let's take a break. I'm going to play an audio clip, and me and Clay are going to come back and break down Such Sweet Sorrow Part 2.
Michael, the Baru ships arrived here piloted by the Kelpians because your signal led Discovery to Kaminar.
Not now, Spock.
Yes, now. Precisely now. The signal's purpose was not simply to liberate the Kelpians, but to prepare them for this very moment. You used each signal to lead Discovery to an element we would need to win this battle.
Starting with Reno on the asteroid.
And to Borith to acquire the time crystal. To Zahia to find the one woman in all the universe with the power. And to Terra Elysium to identify safe harbor once we're through the wormhole.
I saw us fail. I saw everyone die.
The crystal showed you a possible future.
To avoid it, we assumed I'd jump from somewhere in the future to set the signals we didn't know from where. I jumped from here. From this moment.
That is correct. In order for us to push forward, you must go back and set the events of the past in motion, which you have not yet done.
Right. Because we've been stuck in an open loop, and this time, I have all the pieces to close it.
Once you do, Control cannot evolve.
So I'll go back to the asteroid and set the first signal, and then set all the rest again.
I will lead you back here.
And then do you believe we'll be able to go to the future we want?
Of that, I cannot be certain.
So you're asking me to take a leap of faith?
One that is only logical.
Okay, Clay. So I thought I'd structure this one a little bit differently, because normally at the end of each season we do like a wrap-up episode where we talk about the season at length. And I think that the way that this season wrapped itself up, I see the discussion going in such a way that I think this is basically going to be the wrap-up video, because I would like to dedicate maybe 10 minutes at the start of this to talking about what actually happens in this episode, and then the rest of it basically being the ending and what the ending means and how that feels. And I think that's appropriate because, I'll throw it to you, but this was a Discovery episode through and through. I think all the criticisms that I've ever had of every single Discovery episode are on play here. The thing that I really liked about this one is I thought the visual effects were really fantastic. They've always been good in the series. And I think it actually has my favorite shot of the entire thing, which is the no gravity fight scene.
Yeah, that was cool.
That's a really cool thing that they've never done. I thought it looked really great. And, you know, and I also have problems with the visuals at the same time. So it's a very Discovery-esque situation. But let's start off with talking about this episode and the way it works. And I think my big problem with this is that if the ending did not happen the way that it did, I would have been extremely annoyed that this final episode is really like 50 minutes of just nonstop action where you're not really learning anything. They don't answer any questions to the point where all the stuff that we were kind of thinking about before, as I was watching it, I was getting annoyed that they weren't starting to break down what was happening and what was going on. And the action's fine and the visual effects are all great. But like I watched this and I'm watching this battle scene where it looks like the Enterprise and Discovery are getting the shit torn up out of them, right? Like they are fighting constantly for 50 minutes with huge explosions and the ships all seem fine. And it almost crosses a line where Discovery battle scenes almost seem unintentionally funny to me because it's just like pew, 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 pew. It's so many laser beams shooting every single direction. And I don't know. What'd you think?
About the battle scenes or the episode in general?
The episode in general. That's my main takeaway is that because it was just a pure action thing where people are running around and the ships are shooting, I got kind of bored with it. Like it's fantastic to look at, but I was actually a little bit annoyed that they weren't explaining anything up until the very end. Yeah,
I wasn't really surprised that they didn't explain anything up until, you know, the how do we get out of this mess?
I accepted it 20 minutes in. You know, once you make it 20 minutes in, you're like, okay, they're just not going to do that this time.
Yeah, I thought it looked great. I think it continues in what I say about, you know, if you haven't watched any of the other episodes, then this episode works a lot better. But there was a lot of me going. This is multiple times in this episode. I just went, okay, sure, whatever, because it just was like it seemed like they were throwing every bit of flash at you they possibly could to detract from the fact that they had no idea what was going on this season.
Yeah.
Like the whether it's retrofitting apparently 1,000 shuttles that they have on the Enterprise into fighting capable like warships in like an hour and a half.
Yeah.
Or 3D printing a new Red Angel suit based on technology they don't entirely understand and don't have access to that works fine. Or the DOT-7, which is like the repair robots that just pop up out of the hull when they need.
Very
like,
Star Warsy, they look exactly like R2-D2. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm surprised that they didn't do like what do they do in Star Wars? They in the prequels they have those robots that shoot like anti-fire foam or some shit. Like, you know, it's like, I just kept going, okay, fine, whatever. But, like, as far as the actual story goes, it's kind of me doing the same thing, where it's like, you know, the Admiral sacrifices herself by closing one door that apparently somehow stops the entire ship from blowing up.
Well, the ship still blows up, but anything on the other side of that door is fine, because there's a shot of the Enterprise missing a huge chunk of its saucer.
Whatever. Yeah, sure, whatever.
Yep.
Or if it's the complete backtracking of anything they were doing with Culber, which was probably the worst character moment of the entire thing, where they just took all of his stuff and tossed it right out the door.
Well, did they even have anything? Like that's been my point about that. That story is terrible. Like that's a awful, stupid storyline that it is like, if we knew someone who told us they were going through a breakup and that was the entire story, you'd be like, this story sucks. Like this isn't like, there's nothing to this breakup. It's like, just give it up. It's over.
We don't need to relitigate this, but I thought that there was a much more interesting angle they could go with it, and they chose not to go that way. And in fact, they swung the pendulum all the way in the other direction into it being like really bland and stupid, as opposed to like an interesting way to deal with these sci-fi concepts as they, you know, relate to relationships and stuff.
Yes. Yep.
It's a good thing Jet Reno had that vision about the photon torpedo in the Enterprise, because that seemed to play a huge role for her.
Yep. Unfortunately, they neither beamed the Admiral out nor the photon torpedo out of the hull, which would have been a good way to handle that.
Why didn't they beam the? This is an instance that I can agree with the people who said this about the Arium stuff. You do have a transporter. You can beam people out of places before they die, unless you explicitly say that you can't.
Right.
Which is usually how it goes.
Yep. And you must explain if you can't for Star Trek stuff like that to make sense. I think that's a fair rule. Yeah.
Yeah. Also, apparently the time crystal thinks Leland is a much better shot than he actually is. Because what was the point of her having that vision about him showing up on the ship and killing people, and then he shows up on the ship and he doesn't hit anybody?
Yeah. He just goes through the door.
And then he just leaves. And then he just goes and fucks around the rest of the ship, and they have to... What?
Let's actually...
And not to mention the fact they arm in Tanzarian the entire first 2 seasons.
Yeah.
And if you don't know what that means, watch the episode of The Simpsons where the real Principal Skinner comes back, and then at the end of it they go, let's all pretend that never happened and don't speak about it again under penalty of torture.
Let's, I guess a good thing, like a big picture thing here is control. And I didn't really... I
will say one more thing before we get into that. I did really like the visuals of Burnham going through the wormhole. I thought that was really cool.
Yeah,
I do also want to gloat for a second. I did call the Klingon showing up.
Yep, you did.
And I also called sort of... I'm going to give myself a 3/4 win. That I did call there being some sort of 2001-esque wormhole sequence using the time suit, if I remember correctly.
Yeah, I thought it was actually more... when Discovery at the very end is more reminiscent of the motion picture special effect.
Yes, that was definitely the motion picture special effect. But when she goes through it by herself the first time, it was straight up 2001. Which I thought it looked great. Also, bullshit that the Kelpians can fly are like fucking starfighters now. I don't know.
Flying Baul technology.
Yeah, again, all of this stuff is fine if you haven't watched any of the other episodes.
That's a good, I sat down with my wife, Amy, to watch this, and she had not watched any of the Discovery episodes, I don't think, of this season so far. And we always talk about what a person who's unfamiliar with the series and unfamiliar with the franchise would say in these situations. I wrote down everything she said without her noticing, so it didn't alter what she talked about.
Such a psychopath.
She wrote down, her first comment is, has Spock, I told her that's Spock, and she said, oh. And she said, has Spock always had a beard? A couple minutes go by. She goes, is Michael Burnham a Vulcan? And then she says, have they had flying robot suits in Star Trek before? Why is she in a flying robot suit? Why doesn't she fly in a spaceship? And then her final thing before she picked up her book was she made fun of the dying noises that Stamets was making when he was in sickbay. So,
yes, wife, let us spend this quality time together, watching television and not under surveillance.
Let's talk about control, I guess.
Yeah.
I didn't realize until the last episode that this series really has a problem with its villains, and Control is probably a perfect example of that. Didn't turn out to be the Borg, which actually, I think, so much of this episode I have mixed feelings about, where I feel like the Borg thing would have at least provided a reason for this Control storyline to happen, and it would have recontextualized Control in a way that if they aren't that way, we learned a shockingly small amount about what Control is through this season. Like, you never spend time with them. You never learn anything about what this program is trying to do, why it's trying to do what it's trying to do. And it's really weird.
It's trying to evolve, Wes.
I guess.
That should be enough.
But it never lays out the MO for it. You hardly ever talk to them. Leland has startling. I was shocked how little Leland had to say in this episode. I was expecting a lot of talking from him, and that didn't happen. And I just think that it's a holdover from the first season. I just don't think the series does villains very well, and it's really surprising. And it ends up feeling like these characters are going against something that you have no idea what the stakes are, or like. So if you know the stakes, it's like sort of why you don't understand the relationship between them. I find it really frustrating and really like boring in a lot of ways.
Yeah. I think he's, I don't know. I'm not sure what to say about him because he ended up being a lot of nothing. I'm glad that it's not the Borg, I guess.
Even down to his death scene is such a weird, weak shit way to kill Control at the very end. And
right.
This will tie into our discussion of the end, but apparently Control, using the obvious sort of like AI thing of maybe like it's even what we know in the modern internet. You can't get rid of a file on the internet because it spreads everywhere. That's the point. Mm-hmm. Like you can just go into every different system and you'll always have a copy. There won't be a way to get rid of it. Control as a computer program is like, let me put all my eggs in one basket. That is a guy who is like a physical thing and they can destroy. And that's how they get rid of Control at the very end. Yeah, and
after they got rid of Control, I don't know why they just didn't call off the whole jumping to the future mission.
They didn't. They didn't know that because they only learned that there's no more Control in the debriefing after they've left. So I think it's just a case of they have to do it to be sure, which is weak, but that's the reason I think.
Yeah, and having him have no real motivation is a problem. I'm glad that it's not the Borg, if only it would have taken more time to explain how it was the Borg, which I'm happy that I'm actually happy they didn't try to work that in.
I was really expecting it in the opening battle scene. The Admiral calls the Section 31 ships drones because there's no one on it.
Oh yeah.
And I was like, wow, it's definitely the Borg. And then as time was going by, I thought they weren't going to explain that. They were just going to give a very specific line that would indicate that they were the Borg, and the audience would go, oh, I knew it was the Borg, but they don't even do that. It was very interesting.
Yeah. And I feel like they played a little bit of dirty pool too. I mean, not that, of course they have. They've been doing it all season.
It's not the first time that the show has done that, yeah.
But like, Leland being on the ship should be a gigantic deal. Because that's the whole point of what they're doing is to stop him from getting this information.
Right.
And then he gets on the ship, and then he just kind of disappears for like 15 minutes.
2 people run after him. 2 people in the entire thing.
2 people.
Yeah.
And then so the data, right? Where's the fucking data? Is it on her flash drive? If it's on her flash drive, then they broke their own stories because they said you couldn't download it.
Yep.
And if it's not on the flash drive, was it actually in the Spore thing, or was that just a lie to get him into the thing? Assuming it was just a lie, where's the data? And this is the whole point of your fucking story here, is to stop him from getting this data. But it seems to be missing.
Yep.
They didn't lean into that very much, but it's like, I don't know.
They wanted to get to the Kung Fu.
Yeah, I mean, I guess. I don't know. It's just he as a villain was very unsatisfying overall because he's got no real motivation other than like he needs the MacGuffin, and you don't really learn anything about. I mean, do you think that the premonition of the future was enough? The premonition of he's going to evolve into something that apparently is even better than he is now, even though he's pretty good. And then he's going to destroy all sentient life. Is that enough?
Well, no, because we see that some of the future predictions don't come true. It's not a certainty that these things will happen, which is, if all the future flash forwards or flashbacks or whatever you ever want to call them were accurate, I think you'd have that case. But Burnham seeing a Leland scene that does not work out the way that she has in her premonition proves that that's not the case, that the future is unwritten at that point, and they can either not take it for certainty or they can adjust and try to stop it at the way that it goes. But I don't know.
If the future is unwritten, does that mean that Burnham's mom is just really bad at her job? Because her entire point was to tell Burnham that the future is unchangeable.
Yeah.
And also that whole sequence with Pike getting the flash forward to the wheelchair thing. The what's his name? The son there. The Klingon son was like, once you take this thing, that's it. You're down this path and it's unchangeable.
Right.
But then everybody else who touched the crystal, it was changeable. Was it just because he specifically took it?
I think so, a really dumb.
Getting bogged down.
That's a really dumb
bogged down in shit. I wanted to not get bogged down in stuff that doesn't make sense because there's a lot of it.
Well, should we just branch into the ending here and then?
Sure. Yeah.
That'll probably feed off all the other smaller points. So this was the This was the only Discovery episode that I thought about at length after it was over. Normally I'm just like, well, that's that, and I don't need to think about anything, and it's like there's nothing really there to like mull over in my brain about what this meant. And this is not to say this is a good ending. I'm super conflicted about what I think about this episode. I'm super conflicted with the way that they took the show. I'm super conflicted with what this means and whether it's like a good meta conversation for fandom to have. And it's so frustrating because what they did is the right call, right? But it's also obviously fan service at the same time. And you hit this weird point where you're like, I guess I just have to think that maybe fan service is not always bad because the fans were correct in this initial situation. Yeah. Like
in this one instance, it was the right call.
In this one instance, correcting everything like this was the right thing to do.
Which says a lot about your show, if that is actually the one instance in like the history of fan stuff where the fans were right.
We wasted 2 years watching this show, basically, is what this ending is, right? And you have to pair that against the fact that they had to do this. I would have been more pissed off if they hadn't done this. But when it was really such a rock and a hard place. Like there was nothing the show could do at this point that was a good thing to do without either completely admitting that you wasted everyone's time for the past 2 years, or it's just a fan service like buy-in. It's just that there's no good space for the show to go. And while I'm glad that they kind of did it, and if this was a real TV show, I would be like, well, season 3 has now completely liberated the writers. However, the show is not just bad because it was a prequel. The show is badly written. Right. So it's not like this automatically fixes things. It makes things a little bit easier, but it also doesn't mean that the show is going to be any better next year.
Yeah. I also think I predicted a little bit, although it didn't happen exactly this way, that the season was going to end with someone walking through like the place where they put the Ark at the end of Raiders of the Lost Ark, and then just like putting all the information about the Spore Drive up on a shelf and then never talking about it again. It is the right call, but I almost wish, so I through this whole thing have not really cared that much about the new stuff that they've added to canon, like whether it's technological or whatever. I think they could have done this they could have jumped to the future without really making such a glaring admission that they fucked up.
Well, also, it's not just that. Like, it's funny that in an episode where you're going to say that because of all these canon continuity issues, we're going to reset the board. However, in the original timeline, we're going to show you a whole bunch of stuff that has never been talked about before. Like, they introduced those droids that fixed the hull and stuff. You know, like it's like, so why do you...
Those are on the Enterprise. Those aren't on Discovery. Right. So that's technology that the Enterprise has.
Right, and you just never see them. And like these are very nerdy, stupid complaints. However, the show doesn't seem to be able to reconcile how it wants to fix these things. And it's not just the Spore Drive, like you're saying. Like, there's other stuff in the universe. And as we both agree, I don't care about the canon that much. I would have been fine with the show getting rid of the ship and the crew and moving them forward to sort of free up the writers. But I don't really understand why this sacrifice requires that they redact the existence of this crew in the ship. It doesn't make any sense.
Or Michael at all.
Right.
Like, Spock says, I will never talk about her to anyone ever again. It's not like she didn't exist. Yeah. Like, you could, why can't they just do the thing they do at the end of The Rock? Well, they do it here. That's what they do. Where they're like, yeah, they got vaporized. You know, and that's it. They're dead. Okay, sure, they're dead. They didn't jump. As far as Starfleet knows, they're dead. Why is that? Why do they have to go any further than that, really? I mean, if you're going further than that, you are just tying up loose ends that don't really matter. You're spending a long time doing it, too. And did you see the interview with Kurtzman where he said that they're jumping 950 years into the future?
No, I didn't watch anything.
Yeah, he said that the next season is 950 years in the future. And at the risk of sounding like someone who is never happy, I think that's too far. And the reason I think it's too far, excuse me. Sorry, coffee's getting me. The reason I think it's too far is because I think now you are going to run the risk of the exact opposite of the first two seasons, which is having no Star Trek stuff in the show.
Yeah.
Because I don't remember how far in the future Calypso takes place.
1,000 years.
Okay, so right about this amount of time.
There is no Starfleet or Federation, or if there is, they're called different things.
Right. So if that's the case, if what we're dealing with here is now they're jumping into a future where Starfleet doesn't exist anymore, why are you making a Star Trek show?
Well, couldn't you say that's kind of what Voyager is?
That's fair.
If you separate Voyager and to be fair, Voyager does eventually start contacting the Federation halfway through the series, but they are mostly on their own at that point.
Yeah, I guess I'm saying that as someone who is on record as really enjoying to see different types of, how Starfleet changes over the year every time they jump to the future or whatever. So I mean, I don't know. It feels like it's easier now, but are you going to lose the stuff that makes it a Star Trek show? I don't know.
Yeah.
Are you going to swing too far in the other direction? Yeah, I don't know. I'm happy that they made the right decision to jump to the future. I think ultimately it's the right decision.
I think the positives outweigh the negatives here, in my opinion.
However, how telling is it that the last 5 minutes of the show took place on the bridge of the Enterprise?
Yeah, it's very strange.
Like, they don't even show. I mean, obviously they're trying to keep it mysterious as to what the future looks like, etc. But you're
show the bridge, show the interior of Discovery. You don't need to show us anything what's happening outside the ship. You need to show Discovery, I think. Yeah. Otherwise, it's just the Enterprise finale.
You ended season 2 as though season 3 is going to be a show about the Enterprise, which honestly, I'm fine with that too.
You know what? It's just such a. It's another one of the fan service things. There's right. The Enterprise bridge and the colors of the uniforms look so much better than Discovery stuff does. Yeah. It's just like, the colors pop. They look nice. The bridge is well sort of lit. There's color to the lights around the bridge. The banister adds a little bit of color, and the uniforms look great. And the stations are the way that you'd kind of expect them to be in this timeline, with the way that they circle the room and everything. Mm-hmm. And yeah, it's just, I don't know. We have a friend of the show, Darren Mooney, who was tweeting the other day about just the problem with the fandom embracing Pike, right? Who is the stereotypical Star Trekky captain at the expense of Burnham. And it's kind of like this angry internet mail thing that's going on. I strongly disagree with that, just because the reason Pike has been so established is because the performance is good and the character is the most Star Trekky. It's not that it's any kind of thing against Burnham being played by a black woman or anything, at least in my mind. I'm sure there's some people who feel this way, but I don't think this is the majority. The reason Pike has been revered so much is that even though he's not a good written character, he feels like a Star Trek character in a lot of ways. And Burnham is a very poorly written character who doesn't make internal sense, and I don't think thematically amounts to anything. And here at the end, as you're saying, the show would prefer to go in this Star Trek-y way. And it's I'm very torn. I want the series to be different, but the differences that this series chose to make were ones that were so crippling to telling good stories, outside of even being good writing. It's just all these decisions really hamper you, and shedding them seems like fan service, but at the same time, it's the right way to go, I think.
Yeah, and I would argue that I don't think it's the diversity element, because if it were, people would have been clamoring for a Captain Lorca series for the first half of season 1.
Right.
And, it's clearly...
No one gives a fuck about Lorca. Right. Lorca's a terrible character. Yeah.
Yeah. So I think it's more than just, discriminatory elements.
Yeah.
Which, again, do exist. They pop up on the internet all the time, unfortunately.
But just because you embrace that change, just because the better character happens to be a white male does not mean that you think he's a better character because he is a white male. Does that make sense? So it's he's just better than Burnham. And Burnham, it's not that Burnham couldn't be good. but Burnham is so internally conflicted, and I don't understand anything of her Vulcan aspect and how that plays into anything, and I don't really understand what she is as a character and what drives her, outside of the fact that she feels the need to be the center of attention, not the center of attention, but this need to take on too much responsibility. And no, I think we're drifting, but like, so resetting the series here is, I don't know. Did you walk away from this episode thinking this was like the right thing, or were you more annoyed by how did the episode strike you when you were done with it?
I don't know. I just kind of shrugged, I think. Because
Really?
it's like, yeah, it's the right thing to do, but I think much like everything else they've done, the way they got there was really kind of clunky. Like I think there could have been more interesting ways to do it that were more satisfying character-wise than just wiping everybody from existence and it just being, it working fine.
Yeah.
I don't know. I still think that the Red Angel suit should have not worked. I understand whatever, but I still think it would have been, again, I don't want to backseat write the show, but I think it would have been a lot more satisfying if the way they made it to the future involved them using the time crystal and the spore drive.
Yeah.
Because at least in that case, you are using the thing that is native to the show and not just this new technology that you created just to do this.
Yeah. Yeah.
But like, I just, specifics aside like that, yeah, I don't know. I kind of shrugged a lot through most of it. And those long-winded scenes with Burnham and Spock, I actually was looking at my watch and just groaning because when they stopped for like 5 minutes to talk about stuff before she got into the Red Angel suit, I was like, what are you guys doing? You've got no time to do this. And you're like, just hang. And I understand it's like, oh, well, hesitancy to get into X, Y, and Z. Well, you get one of those scenes.
Yeah.
In a situation like this, I say you get one. You either get to talk before everything starts or you get to talk before you get split up for the last time.
Yeah.
And they did both of them, and I thought it grinds everything to a halt.
You know what I noticed, and we've brought this point up on Real Ripe and Real Rotten, which is our movie show where we talk about the best and the worst films, and we see a lot of the worst ones that have come up have been comedies. Interestingly, when people try to do comedy, they fail kind of majestically. And Discovery has what we've discovered the trait is amongst all or most bad comedies in it. Discovery's writing treats humor without context. All attempts at making a joke in Discovery are obvious insertions of a punchline and don't organically come from the situation at hand. I thought the non-character in this episode, who's the security chief, came off like she was off her meds in this episode because she's cracking wise the whole time, saying like yum yum, and I think at one point when she and Georgiou burst in on Leland, she almost has this line that implies she wants to have a threesome with all of them, and it was really strange, and it just struck me as
We're here to fix your cable.
That's where the bad writing comes from. It's like they want to insert these jokes into situations where the ship is blowing up, and because you don't know anything about the characters, you can't do the usual Star Trek thing, which is that the humor comes from the characters being in awkward situations.
Yeah. I think actually the most consistent is Tilly.
Sure.
I think Tilly, their writing for her is at least consistent.
It is. It's annoying, but it's consistent.
People, I know some people find her annoying, but I think she's actually written pretty well as far as like the stuff that she says and the way that she's acted. I think it's solid.
Yeah.
So like it doesn't surprise me that she's like, I can fix that. I did it once as a drinking game. It's like, yeah, okay, sure, whatever. That's just her thing.
That is. And that's a joke that builds out of that character. I'd agree with that.
Exactly. Yeah. But a lot of the other stuff, I still don't. I don't know. I don't know how Georgiou is going to be in this Section 31 show if she's 950 years in the future now.
Yeah.
Unless it turns out that she somehow slipped off the ship, because why not? Because what? So how long does it take to get from Discovery to wherever the fucking Vulcans, the Klingons are? It's going to take more than an hour, right?
What do you mean?
Like 2 hours? I was going to say that it doesn't matter. She might not have been on the ship because of the way that the way space works in this show.
Oh, I see, right.
And Tyler actively leaves the ship and goes all the way to Klingon or Kronos by himself.
Yeah.
to get the entire Klingon armada to come back.
The D7s.
Yeah, sure. I guess I completely forgot about him until he showed up.
They didn't show us this scene of him leaving, which is interesting. They have the scene last episode where he says to Pike, I got to do this thing, and Pike's like, "What are you going to do?" And he's like, "I can't tell you." Oh, I don't even remember that. Okay, so they do say that he's leaving.
Yeah, because then they have that other scene after the goodbye party when everyone says we're going to the future, and she's like, and Burnham's like, "You're not going, are you?" He's like, "No, I have something I got to do." You would think that you would want to tell people about that.
I'm going to come with it.
I mean, like, why do you have to be secret about the fact that you're going to get help?
Yeah, bring the cavalry. Well, not to derail us. Let's focus on the. I do want to focus on the end. Like, I think this episode only matters for the end. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. Like, it only exists to have this ending. And is there any other way to describe the past 2 seasons other than a waste of time? Like, if season 3 comes out, would anyone ever watch these first 2 seasons again? What's the point of watching this? It's been like an extended dream sequence in a lot of ways. Yeah. And
this is the one, the how everybody says, "Oh, Star Trek, I want to watch Star Trek," and people are like, "Oh, don't watch the first 2 seasons, start with season 3 across the board." You literally could do that here and not miss a beat.
Yeah.
I think. I would say instead of just watch the last episode of season 2. You might not even need to do that.
They're going to explain what happens in the start of season 3. They're going to come through and say, because we did this, we saved the universe, and now we're stuck in the future. Yeah.
Yeah, but I mean, the characters are not in a place that is different from where they were in the first episode of the first season.
Saru is brave. You forget that.
Saru is brave, and Burnham is the same, I guess. Yeah.
The
only difference is that Georgiou is a mirror cat emperor.
That's a good thing.
Apparently just likes cracking jokes now.
That's a good place to maybe we'll do that some other time. But I think that the way that it ended, I don't know. Like, does anyone think that was actually it is just the rock in the hard place. Like, there's nothing that the series could do. It was in such a bad position that the thing that it had to do ends up feeling like it's just kind of like a silly little cheat. And I don't know if that's all down to the fact that they wipe the board at the end, like they just clear off everything, and I would have been okay with not doing that. But I don't know. Do you feel it was like 100% fan response to this, or is this like something that they potentially were thinking about doing from early in the season?
I think it's something that they probably thought about before the second season started. Yeah. I think this was probably always the end game. And I think that is probably, I don't, even though I would say in this case, the fans were right. Yeah. That makes me dirty even saying that, but, I don't think it is explicitly entirely a reaction to that, because I think you end up in a situation, just because of the nature of where they started their show, that, like you said, this stuff has to be removed somehow. And whether that's jumping to the future or, doing a Voyager thing where you end up in the Delta Quadrant or something, you were going to have to remove them from continuity.
Yeah, at some point. It's weird that and as you said, removing them from continuity is almost purely like a memory alpha exercise. Like, they don't really remove them. The way I thought this was going to be is that I thought the time crystal here was going to reset things to the very start of this ever happening and never having it, because then you completely clear the board of everything. Instead, they do it the other way, which is very rightly, which is the reason they can exist is because Spock never talks about his sister in the next series. So let's give him a literal reason he cannot bring her up at all. Yeah, not that she doesn't exist, but he can never say her name going forward.
Yeah, it was just so. Again, I've used this phrase before. It's a wrestling term. It's overbooked in that they put too much into the story, and they ended up just making it more jumbled, past the point of believability. again, you don't have to explain all that stuff. I mean, you could just, they jump into the future, and then it's like, maybe we don't talk about this anymore, or something. It does. I don't know. I don't think you have to tie things up that cleanly, because like, what are you gaining by doing that in your story? Right? It's purely a technical exercise. It's not. Doesn't have anything to do with the characters. It doesn't have anything to do with like the emotion of the show.
No, or the angle, the argument of if you want to say that this season had a theme, it's apparently faith versus reason, which that is not the theme. They bring it up in maybe 2 episodes, so that makes it seem like it's a season-long theme, but it's. And
she says it at the end. She has to take a leap of faith.
Yes, and it's whatever. That's. I just feel that there's a lot of arguments that defend the show that say because an episode brings up an idea, it's about that idea, and that's not true. Like, just because a show brings up an idea about fate or faith or anything like that does not mean that the show is exploring that idea. It's just window dressing for things.
Right.
And this show is not about anything. It's about the roller coaster ride. And so when you get to the end and they have these scenes where I would have thought it was better if when Discovery jumps, you never go back and see the previous timeline. You literally leave the TOS era in the dust, and Discovery's now in the future. We never see Spock talking to the guy who's asking for the debriefing, saying, I'm never going to talk about her again. Instead, maybe you have a Burnham scene at the end saying, I wonder how Spock will react to this and if he'll ever think about me again in the future, Yeah. They don't do that. Yeah. They don't focus on Burnham thinking about her relationship with Spock. They have a fucking scene where they tell you, change the memory alpha to this. Yeah. This is the reason why this needs to happen. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. I would say that last like 10 minutes or so feels the most like responding to fan stuff, because all of that stuff was just pure fan stuff. It was tying up the continuity canon shit. It was, hey, you guys like Pike? Here's in the Enterprise. Here's an extended final look at Pike in the Enterprise before they leave.
Here's Spock without a beard. Yeah, like you complained about his beard. Here he is, beardless.
Yeah, I think you're right. I think ending. They should have, once they were gone. Boom, that should have been it. And I mean, maybe you could have done a little, maybe like a quick something, maybe as a voiceover, or I don't know. You could tie it up a little bit, I guess, if you really wanted to. But I think, it would have been a lot more.
I would have been on Discovery. To be clear, I would have had a scene on Discovery and have Burnham's voiceover or whatever talking about that, and that be the sort of final thesis of where they ended up. Because these are the characters that we have going forward. It doesn't really matter to me what Spock thinks about this at this point. It's more important about what Burnham, or should be more important about what Burnham thinks. And I would have liked to, if you are literally severing that tie, it does not make sense to go back and focus on the point that you're trying to leave behind. It's like trying to have this relationship end and you keep going back and trying to get back together. It's like Pike is gone at this point. Move on. This is the ship. It's in the future. Let's see what they're doing for 2 seconds. Yeah.
Do they take any time in Star Trek V to talk about why Spock never talks about his brother?
Well, and what do I can't remember what they say in 5, but it's funny that they never bring up Cybok in this series.
I know. I was expecting. I mean, it would be. It seems like it would be the perfect place to make a nod to that, but they never do. For a second. I didn't read the I didn't know how far they were jumping into the future, until after I saw the episode. So a part of me was kind of hoping that it was going to end with them jumping to the future, and then it was going to be like, where are we? I don't know. Sir, there's a sensor of a ship coming through, blah, 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 blah. It's the Enterprise. Boom, Enterprise X. Basically the same way they end the first one, except, 200-300 years in the future.
Well, I mean, it's kind of funny mirroring. I faintly remember, I'm never going to watch season 1 again, but I faintly remember the end of season 1. The Admiral was saying that all the spore drive was going to be blacklisted. And weren't we surprised at the start of this that they were using the spore drive over? And we thought that, hey, I thought that they were saying that. What's that?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. And so they kind of just repeated what didn't seem to stick in the first season. It's like, we have to do this in a more permanent way so that we're not tempted to use the sport drive. So let's just jump with it. Yeah.
I think I saw in a comment somewhere on, maybe it was on the, I think I read Jesus, my mind is not working today. A review on EW, I think. And someone pointed out that they do the same thing at the end of the first season when they completely just say, yeah, let's never talk about the mirror universe.
Yeah, that's what I mean. It's a very similar thing of everything that has happened here. Let's all forget about it, and this is a more permanent way to forget about it.
Yeah.
They just realized that they realized that people agreeing to talk about it was not good enough. They have to remove the people who would potentially talk about it from the series totally.
Yeah, I feel like if the wrap up to your season is a bunch of people pretending like a bunch of stuff never happened, you kind of might need to take another swing at it.
Yeah. Twice. They did it 2 times. They did it 2 times in a row. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. I don't know. It's kind of baffling.
It's what's also like, and you said this in a previous episode, if they wanted to do this, doing this in season 1, episode 4, having the time jump happen, that's a great setup for a Star Trek series. Yeah. Like we've invented this spore drive technology that breaks canon. So to fix that, we just have the ship disappear, basically, and no one, like, it never seems. And at that point, you could say the tech is too dangerous or something like that. Like, there's some basic rationale for never seeing this again. And then this series is now with advanced technology in a setting where they can freely use that technology and go about their business. People have said this since the start of the series, but I wonder what the behind the scenes of this must have been. Like, people battling to please let us reboot this series in a way that makes sense. And people saying, no, we have to stick with it. Like, this is the era that people want. We've read YouTube comments, like, people who are really into TOS are the biggest douchebags about everything. So we have to please them and show them a TOS era thing.
Yeah.
And I don't know. It's very strange. Are you looking forward to season? Well, let's take a break. We're going to play an audio clip. We'll come back. We'll give our final thoughts about Discovery's second season and this episode in particular.
The destruction of Discovery was tragic, but does not in and of itself resolve the issue. Even more radical steps must be taken to ensure that type of scenario never repeats itself.
I'm eager to hear your recommendations, Lieutenant.
Regulation 157, Section 3, requires Starfleet officers to abstain from participating in historical events. Any residual trace or knowledge of Discovery's data, or the time suit, offers a foothold for those who might not see how deeply critical that directive is. Therefore, to ensure the Federation never finds itself facing the same danger, all officers remaining with knowledge of these events must be ordered never to speak of Discovery, its board drive, or her crew again, under penalty of treason.
Thank you, Mr. Spock. We'll take it under advisement.
All right, everybody. So if you enjoyed the content today, as we rambled on about the wrap-up of Discovery's second season, you can join us on patreon.com/the Pensky File. If you want to support the show, it's the best place to go. And as always, the Captain tier supporters over there get a shout-out to Andrew Cherlog, Ben Douglas, Bradley Killens, Captain Quark, David K., Tecker Sebastiani, Dwayne Hackett, Eric Johnson, Yarpy, Joint Mango, Kyle Barrett, Matt Flores, Matthew Cutler, Matt Ross, Michael Pond, Mike Burnett, Nathan Elliott, Nick Sergi, Robert Cummins, Russ Graham, Samuel Custer, Grim Santo, Sean Spinobi, Stephen Cobb, Tark Latif, and Will Yates. Thank you guys for sticking with us through this. I've talked to a lot of you on social media or the Discord channel. Everyone feels kind of worn out at this point, Clay, in our audience. There are some people who are extremely angry about the way that Discovery has gone. Even the most optimistic amongst us, I could name a few names, people who generally like the series are kind of seemed resigned to it by the end of this is where it kind of had to go. And I don't know what that says for the series as a whole, but
I apologize if I'm all over the place today. I feel like I'm all over the place.
I feel I'm all over the place too. Yeah.
Yeah. For some reason, I'm finding it difficult to talk about. I think because there's so many things going on, like is this taking it out of context of
we agreed with it, to be clear, before we started recording, we both kind of were like, we're tired of talking about the technical failures of this show. We're tired of talking about like the plot holes and the things that don't make any sense. Your thing about Spock on the hologram killing the guards. Why don't they know that?
Yeah.
It's like there's just tons.
Why do they see 7 signals?
Right. That's a good. Why do they see
But
7 signals at the start of the series when it hasn't? Why do they see them all at once for some reason?
Yeah, they see them all at once, but they also only know where one of them is.
Right.
So they know that there are 7 signals out there, but they can't just go to them until they appear.
Yeah.
Like that's something that we never really grasped onto that as going through the season, because it just
didn't seem important.
I don't know if it really stood out for some reason, but it doesn't really make any sense the way that they were playing. And then even let's say, okay, yeah, she makes all those, goes back in time and makes all the signals. Those last 2 that they see in the first episode, they shouldn't see because they're in the future.
I think that the last 2 fits the same as every other signal, which is that they shouldn't show up until Burnham goes to that point in the timeline and makes it appear to them. You know what I mean?
I see. Yeah, okay, yeah.
So,
but still, it's still a whatever. I mean, it's one of those things where it's like, sure, fine, whatever.
Yeah.
The other question I found myself asking, not to get too bogged down, is like, what do we have a clear idea of what Red Angels were Burnham and which ones were her mom?
No, I don't think so.
Like the one that really threw me off was the when she sets the red signal for where they find Jet Reno. That's her who shows up
to herself
when Michael gets like a hot piece of metal
stalagmite in the leg. Yeah.
And doesn't that kind of bust the theory that they worked with a handful of episodes ago that her mom keeps showing up to save her from dying?
Yes, it does, doesn't it?
Yeah, because what instances? So does the mom only show up in the Red Angel visions to Spock? Is that the because that seems to be what it is? Because otherwise,
that's true. Because Burnham never went back and did those.
Yeah, so she shows up to Spock. But then this idea that she shows up to save Michael from dying doesn't make any sense.
Yeah. Because
the other instances where Michael sees the Red Angel, it's herself.
Yep. And the suits at that point, when did they get the Michael DNA? What contact is that from? I don't remember. Does that make sense
it's after the Baul.
So, but that's a signal that is Burnham gone back, right? That is Burnham's DNA. So that's just a red herring type thing, I guess. It's so which came first here, chicken or the egg? Is the show written? Was the pace decided before? I think it's kind of an obvious. I'm just kind of being a douche about asking this question, but like, do they decide on the pace of the show that they want this rapid fire pace, and then the problems come? Or do they write the story and have so many problems that they're like, we got to pick up the pace so that people forget about all these problems? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's got to be pace first, in that the writers can't keep track of everything that's going on, because the what I believe to be the structural problem or the storytelling problem is that they have, as we've talked about, this show is extremely plotted before they start filming the show. They know exactly where they want to go and which episode is going to get there and how it's going to all end up and where they want to be. And the problem with this style of writing that Breaking Bad does not have, where Breaking Bad writes the episodes one at a time, they have a general idea, but they don't have a plot-heavy destination as like, you must get here through these means. They try to get there more organically by writing it as the episodes come. Discovery's problem is that once you are halfway into the season and things are starting to not make sense, you can't fix them anymore. It's like you're stuck in this thing of like, well, I could try to obviously plaster over the holes in this story, but fuck it. Like, and if our story is so shoddy at this point, why bother trying to fix things going forward? Why not just like plow through all this stuff? And that's the problem with this style of writing, is that the writers could even be great writers, but because they have so many plot details and so many twists and red herrings that eventually it all starts to lose itself, and you have to write episodes that contradict earlier things.
Yeah, it really is a great counterpoint to the idea that you should have the whole story written out before you start. Sorry, Cordy. It's not to use another wrestling comparison, but it reminded me about the big thing this year at WrestleMania was that for the first time ever, women were main eventing the show. and it was a triple threat match with Ronda Rousey, Becky Lynch, and Charlotte Flair.
Not my WWE.
No.
Go ahead.
I can't wait to see your angry internet tweets about how the fact that women are taking over wrestling. And
all the low blows mean nothing in this world, Clay, if that happens.
Continuity is shattered. But the setup for it was like so simple, where it was Becky Lynch became this massive fan favorite, and they put her on a collision course with Ronda Rousey. And it was a story that kind of wrote itself, but A, they didn't intend on it to happen that way, and B, it ended up happening, the fire got lit like way too early for it to be sustainable. So, long story short, I think that it was supposed to be planned out that it was going to be Charlotte versus Ronda, but then Becky became this monster fan favorite, so they kind of had to shift things, and then she got hurt, and so that shifted things even more, and so she ended up falling into the spot where she was going to fight Ronda Rousey at WrestleMania. Again, writes itself, but they had to fill like 3 months of weekly television storytelling.
Yeah, just treading water to get to that moment.
Yeah. So what they ended up doing was they just made it the most convoluted mess you could possibly think of, where first Becky lost her title shot only because Vince McMahon showed up and said, you don't get it anymore. And then he plugged in Charlotte Flair to be her replacement. So then Becky had to win the Royal Rumble, and then after that she got her knee hurt, which got her taken out, and then she came back and her knee was fine. And then she had to, I think I'm out of sorts, but there was a point where she wasn't cleared to compete, so she was going to lose her fight unless she got evaluated and then apologized for being such a bitch. Mm-hmm. And then she was arrested, and then she was let out of jail, and then everyone was arrested, and then everyone was let out of jail, and then everybody was out of the fight, and then everybody was back into the fight, and then it just went on so long, and it just got so convoluted and overbooked, this is where the term comes into play, that by the time they got to the match, you were just like, yeah, that was fine, I guess.
Right.
You know, it did what it had to do, but they just kept throwing so much shit at it to make it more and more complicated to fill this time, that it just ultimately wasn't as satisfying as it should have been.
Yeah. Real estate is all about location, and story is all about pacing.
Yeah, and I think that's very similar to how this season ended up shaking out, where it's like they had a lot of stuff that they had on their note cards, and they had to do all of it because they had to make it through 13 episodes or however many episodes with like 8 episodes worth of story.
Yeah. Yep, I'd agree. I'd 100% agree. And the show, I mean, let's end it with, are you looking forward to season 3?
Sure. I don't know. I guess I'm interested to see what happens.
Yes.
I mean, I kind of wish that they hadn't said how far into the future they were going, because now that I know it's 1,000 years, I'm kind of like, okay, this seems like a lot. The number of years is a very relative thing, and I think it's really hard to comprehend how long that time is, actually. Like I don't know if I've said this before, but not in a while anyway. I was reading this book about Scotland, and they would talk about sections in it where the Vikings were, had taken over and they were ruling this area of England or whatever. And it would say in the book, the Vikings were only there for a short period of time, from about AD 700 to AD 1000.
Yep.
And I'm like, oh, okay, yeah, that's not that long. And then I stopped and I was like, wait, that's 300 fucking years.
Yep.
That's longer than the existence of our country.
Yeah, yeah. We're Americans. We have a different sense of like what the length of time is.
In the large scale, obviously, it's not that much time, but in the short scale, that's a long time.
Yeah. You have a couple family members living in that meantime. You've developed roots and everything. You consider it your home. Yep. Yeah.
So I feel like 1,000 years is I don't know where it becomes negligible. I don't like if they had jumped 100 years into the future versus if they had jumped 1,000 years into the future.
Yeah. Well, they have to avoid Picard is the thing, you know?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Why though? Why? I don't know. Why wouldn't you?
That's just such a if they
It's such a layup though. If you're setting this, when is the show the Picard show coming out?
You mean like on TV when it's coming out?
Yeah.
At the end of the year.
Oh, okay. So that's soon. All right, never mind. Because I was going to say I'm surprised they didn't jump to right around that time just to set up the timeline. I would have been super pissed off about that just because that's such an MCU inspiration. I think like that would be them saying we've developed all these Star Trek things and we're going to merge them into one thing at this point. Yeah. And that would have really, it would have seemed derivative to me. I think it's like them just copying what they think is a successful way to go about building a universe. I think. Yeah. I'm okay with them going. I'm okay with the time jump. I think. Yeah. I think I'm okay. I think that just for the sheer fact that everything is open to you writers. Like I'm putting the ball squarely in the hands of the writers here and saying, listen, you have a totally blank canvas to work with. Mm-hmm. You are unshackled. Mm-hmm. You can do all the cool things that you could think about in this timeline. Do something. And again, I'm looking forward to seeing what it is. I think I'm more interested to see what the setup is than I know that the execution will probably not be great. Would be my assumption. And yeah, I would agree. I'm looking forward to see what they do. If this was us talking about this before the first season started, I think I would be a lot more optimistic.
Yeah. If this was the concept of the show, you mean?
Yeah. Even if it was like the 4th episode of the first season, and it was like you get the battle, the binary stars or whatever, and then X, Y, and Z, and then they jump. Oh God, that's just making me think of a better show. Because then you've got Burnham, who is like in the brig, but now they have no people on the ship except for the people on the Discovery, so she has to be reinstated, or she has to like fight to be reinstated. It's just a better show organically.
Yeah. Yeah.
I think I would be a lot more optimistic if we were in the middle of season 1 or early in season 1. Let's put it that way.
Yeah.
But yeah, I'm interested to see what they do.
I've developed a deep enough relationship with this show where I can feel myself. I'm now prejudiced towards this show. You know what I mean? Like I believe that I know how they are going to act before they start acting that way. And if I'm not exactly right, I at least I'm in the ballpark of understanding what they're going to do. And the problem is now that I don't know if the show has gone so far where I'm just always, the reaction I see online is this split where people are either like all for this show and refuse to admit that it has problems, or they endlessly bitch about it. And it's tiresome. Like I almost think that if I was an executive in charge of this series, I would almost try to end Discovery as soon as possible and focus on the other series. There's so many other series that are coming out. Yeah. And once Picard's show comes out, I think that'll be a little bit easier to swallow on the part of the executives. But I could easily see Discovery ending after this season because I think listener Kyle has said it in the Discord, Discovery is no one's baby at this point. Like no one involved in the creation of the show is really here anymore. And it seems like it was more of an albatross on the franchise than anything. And everyone seems to be more excited doing their own projects that are spinning off of this. And I don't know. I don't think that... I think Discovery is so tainted. And I think that the way this season ended only adds to that. Like it's only... If you're in the pro camp, you think this is the greatest Star Trek twist of all time. If you're in the anti camp, you're like, well, of course this series is going to try to wipe its hands of everything in the clunkiest way possible. And I think you can tell which camp I'm in. But I think that I just don't think that people are ever going to be fair to this show. I try to be fair in these reviews, but I think I'm worn out. And maybe a year off will give me a little bit of like a breath to catch up and be done with it. But I don't enjoy Discovery in the way that it treats me as a viewer. And I don't enjoy it as a series. And I don't think even with this massive time change, things are going to be different in the next year.
Yeah, I'm getting really tired of the bait and switch is the biggest thing that I'm getting tired of, because it feels to me like they were writing the show specifically to get people arguing over shit, and then they don't end up paying anything off.
Yeah, that's a good point.
Or they don't pay it off in a way that makes any sense. It's all just like, oh yeah, you guys are arguing about stupid shit.
It's a bait and switch solution to a bait and switch setup in a lot of cases, you know?
Yeah. Yeah. It's like if at the end of, I mean, this is probably a bad example, but it's like at the end of Empire Strikes Back when Luke goes off to fight Vader and Obi-Wan and Yoda are saying like, well, that's it. He was our last hope. And Yoda's like, no, there is another. If it just turned out that it was like there is a second Luke Skywalker.
Yeah, right.
You know, something like really off the beaten path that you hadn't considered, that doesn't actually make any sense, or it's like he was just talking about how many chips were left in the bag.
Yep.
Not actually talking about, it would be as if he was talking about something completely different. And they were just, you didn't see the first half of their conversation where they were actually talking about how many buffalo wings were left on the plate. Yeah, and it's because you find yourself, they keep doing this thing where they present you with stuff that should be, they present you with stuff that seems like it should be a very important story point, and then they just don't talk about it again, or they just dump it in favor of something else in the next episode. And I don't know if that is a result of the franticness of changing showrunners midway through, so they're just trying to get to the finish line. I don't know, but it seems.
I think it's due to the way we talked about earlier. It's the way the show is written. By the time you have these plot points beat out, you have no time to realize which are the good ideas and which are the bad, because you have to get to the next point. So if you have a really great idea that's only a plot point on your note card, when you get to it, you're like, oh man, this is the only thing that's working in the show. Unfortunately, I have to dump it to move to the next thing.
Yeah.
You know, so they have no time while they're writing it to recognize what is working and what is not working, because they've already plotted it so heavily that they have to move on.
Yeah, and I think they fall into it really heavily the problem, we've talked about it before, of writing certain scenes because that's the kind of scene that should be written here, not actually writing one that's organic. For instance, like you get stuff like the reconciliation with Culber and Stamets, right? Which is, I guess that should be here, but it's not earned. It's just that's the kind of scene that needs to go here because we need to wrap up their story.
Yes.
You get the I'm giving her all she's got captain type of scene where Jet Reno is like, I need 7 more hours to fix this thing. And she's like, you've got 2. And she's like, I'm not going to be able to do it. And then she does it and they never talk about it again.
Right.
Lots of that stuff. Like, I'm not sure why could she only jump to the past, and then only after she jumped to the past could she jump to the future?
I thought there was only one charge left in the crystal. So I don't ask me how the suit works when I was informed that we can only jump once. When she
gets the suit on and she's trying to jump to the future, she physically cannot get the suit to do it.
Oh, that's right. It's broken. Yeah.
And then she jumps to the past, and after she jumps to the past, she can now jump to the future.
Yes.
So it's like, is the suit is built upon the condition that a paradox must first happen in order to work for the time? I don't know.
It's anyway, broken until you go back and set up the paradox of it being fixed or whatever. Yeah.
Yeah. Not to. I'm going to do this just because I feel like I deserve it after a season. I'm going to rewrite the end of this episode and how they get to the future. And what I would do is I would have them kind of go along the way that it goes until the point where they're dollying the suit through that hallway, and then Stamets gets a spike through his chest or whatever.
Mm-hmm. That's his dying noise.
At that point, I would take him off to the sick bay, and then I would have them continue on. But I would have Jet be like, "Listen, guys, I can't. This isn't going to work. It's going to be last minute if it works at all. So they have to start flying the ship towards the area where the wormhole goes. They have to leave Enterprise. Enterprise has to fend everybody off and give them cover while they're. I'm going to be ignoring a bunch of plot points here,
sure.
Just so you know. Enterprise has to cover them while they fly off to the point where the wormhole is going to be, and because they need all the time they have charging this thing up. They can't just put it in the suit. So they get closer and closer and closer, and they finally get to the point where the thing is ready, but it doesn't work in the suit for whatever reason, maybe because they didn't, cross their I's and the T's or whatever. So they realize that they need the extra bit of juice. Yeah, maybe it's not fully charged, so they put it into the suit. It doesn't work. So they realize they need the extra bit of juice needs to come from the spore drive. So then she in the Red Angel suit gets into the spore drive thing, but can't activate it without Stamets, who has to drag himself out of sickbay and plug himself in to the thing. And that's when you have Culber come out and they have kind of like a through the glass reconciliation scene, and that gives him the strength that he needs to, plug himself into the spore drive, which probably will kill him.
Yeah, they forgive each other, realizing that the end is near. Yeah.
So you have Burnham plug herself into the spore drive and use the spore drive and Stamets in order to jump them into the future. That's how I would have ended it.
Yeah.
I don't care about the red signals, clearly. You could hand wave something there. I don't know. Maybe they plug the time crystal into her suit, and it gives her enough power to go to send the signals, but she can't jump forward or some shit like that.
Well, the spore drive allows her to jump the distances that the red signals are. So by the function of combining the time travel aspect with the spore drive, they're able to both travel through time and huge amounts of distances at the same time to place all those beacons. Yeah.
Yeah. Why not?
Yeah.
But anyway, that way you've got everybody working together. You've got a more organic way to get them all to the future instead of just relying on this new technology that you didn't know about 12 episodes ago. The Culber and Stamets thing has a little bit more weight to it instead of just fucking drugging him. I'm going to put you into a coma, but before you fall asleep, let me tell you how much I love you.
Who?
That would be much more interesting if it was happening like he's plugged into the spore drive and he's like starting to pass out or something, some shit like that. I don't know.
Yep.
Or have Culber, maybe he's like plugged into the spore drive, but he can't focus or whatever. He can't focus on where he has to go because he's bleeding out of his chest. And it's like a larger jump through space and time than he's ever done. So then you have Culber come into the thing and touch him or something, and he's got spore DNA or some shit like that, and that focuses him enough that they can jump through time.
Well, what if, just spitballing here before we wrap this up, Culber comes in, right, and fixes them up enough for Stamets to do the jumps. Culber does what he promises to do and leaves for the Enterprise. He decides not to go through with the ship and everything. Mm-hmm. And the mirroring there is that where the initial separation came up from Culber being in the Spore universe, now it flips it the other way around. Stamets has to go into the Spore universe. They're separated again by the Spore universe constant. However, this time it's a mutual decision to happen, and it just kind of mirrors it, where now Stamets has gone through it and he's separated from Culber, and Culber goes on, breakup is complete, and he is now in TOS, and we just never see that character again.
Yeah, you could do that too, but I think you would need, because Stamets' whole character this season is him moping about the fact that Culber is dead, and then when he comes back, he's moping about the fact that Culber is no longer with him. So I could see Stamets being put in a position where he has to kind of get his shit together. Okay. And Culber being the thing that helps him do that. Whether or not he comes back and he's like, "You're my life, I love you," or whatever. I think if you don't want to go that far, I think you can have a reconciliation where there is an acknowledgement of their relationship that gives him the power to, get back on the horse, so to speak. Yeah. Without it being, "I love you, I'm not leaving your side," or whatever. I don't know. I think there's something in there because I think him leaving is interesting, but ultimately I think it would be unsatisfying story-wise to just have him leave.
Yeah, sure.
So I think there's something they could have done there, and it gives more purpose to that story instead of just having it be a stupid side mission.
Yeah, it is.
I don't know.
It's a side quest. Let's we talked for an hour and 15.
Alex Kurtzman, call us. We'll be happy to get angry at all of the scripts that you send us to look at.
We're done with Discovery Season 2. Thank you guys for listening very much. We appreciate everyone who's listened, everyone who's commented, everyone who gives us feedback on social media and Discord and all that stuff. It's been a long journey. I can't say that I'm sad that it's over, but I don't know. We'll see what season three brings to the fold. And in the meantime, there's a lot more Star Trek going on that we've got to both cover.
There was a preposterous number of ships.
Yeah, the shuttles you're talking about.
Yeah. And also,
I was thinking that would be like me going up to some like some big bouncer, and I was like, me and my army of ants are going to destroy you. Like they're comically underpowered, these little shuttlecrafts that are flying around.
Yeah. And I didn't totally understand why you needed to have two people shoot them.
No.
That was a strange plot point where they were just like, where Poe there was like, yeah, I figured out if two ships shoot them at the same time, they blow up.
It's just
which
hard
actually
mode.
Makes you
engage hard mode.
Which actually, it actually makes your fleet less effective then, because you now have half as many ships.
Yep.
And I don't know, why didn't they have the two big ships do that?
Busy shooting at everybody.
You've got these giant phaser arrays on both ships. Why don't you call over to Discovery and be like, hey, let's target the same ships and shoot them like 1,000 of these things at the same time. I don't know, whatever.
Guys, thank you very much for listening. Let us know your thoughts about Discovery's second season. I'm anxious to.
Are you pissed off? Sorry, are you pissed off that Harry Mudd didn't come back to make all of those short treks absolutely
influential,
necessary to see?
No, don't care. Even Calypso isn't necessary to see. Really, it doesn't add to anything.
No, and it's not even necessarily in line with what's going to happen next season anyway.
No, they can totally change it at that point. All right, guys, thank you very much for listening. You can check out all the social media, Discord, Facebook, Twitter. You can support the show at patreon.com/the Pensky File. There's also a couple links down in the video description or the podcast blurb, or you can go to PayPal, or you can go to the Teespring account and buy a t-shirt. And other than that, I think we're done. Just recommend the show on social media or Reddit or anything like that if you want to spread the word about it. That's much appreciated. But we're done with Discovery Season 2. Clay, final thoughts? Anything you want to say before we go?
I hope for the best, I guess.
Plan for the worst.
Yeah, I mean, I'm looking forward to see what's going on with Picard.
Yeah.
Yeah. And join us in July for The Mandalorian.
That's right. Thank you very much, guys, for listening, and we will see you next time.